As the president of the EEB, I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to the 2023 annual conference of the EEB. This year hosted by EEB together with one of our Swedish member organizations, the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation, SSNC, which I'm also the president. And with me on stage, I have the Secretary General of the SSNC, Karin Lexén.
Thank you, Johanna. And also from me, a warm welcome also from SSNC and Naturskyddsföreningen. With Sweden holding the Council presidency, the Swedish government has welcomed their colleagues to Sweden for a number of meetings. And we are now very happy, together with the EEB, to welcome our friends from the European environmental movement to Stockholm. We are also very pleased to see so many Swedish participants in the audience, a range of different actors with one thing in common, our engagement in a strong European environmental protection. However, at the same time, while we are gathering here in Stockholm, Russia's war on Ukraine is still ongoing, resulting in the loss of thousands of lives, environmental destruction, and an extremely challenging situation for our fellow colleagues in the environmental movement in Ukraine. We are with you in our hearts and in our thoughts.
This conference takes place against a backdrop of urgency posed by the triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and chemical pollution. As we in this room are well aware of, these three interrelated crises are posing a significant threat to our planet, to justice and peace, and their impacts are already being felt around the world. The effects of climate change are becoming increasingly apparent, from rising sea levels to more frequent and intense natural disasters and increasing inequalities. Biodiversity loss, on the other hand, is threatening the very fabric of our ecosystems and the critical services they provide, from pollination to carbon sequestration. Again, those directly depending on intact nature, such as small-scale farmers, will be impacted first and most. Finally, chemical pollution is contaminating our air, our water, and soil, and endangering the health of millions of people and wildlife. We are all dependent on the environment and will be affected by the consequences of exceeding planetary boundaries. And the effects do not stop at national borders.
The severity of these crises cannot be ignored and is demanding powerful and active responses from all parts of society. In today's conference, we will focus on the specific role of the European Union. As a major economic power and a significant contributor to the triple crisis, there lies a heavy responsibility on the EU to limit its footprint within Europe and in the world in line with international agreements. The EU also has the potential to lead by example and inspire global action by ambition policy making and leading by example.
In 2019, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen launched the European Green Deal. The Green Deal promised to deliver a set of deeply transformative policies and was the first of its kind globally. Taking stock of the Green Deal to date, we find a mixed bag of results. There are a number of clearly good commitments that support a transformative agenda, such as the EU biodiversity strategy and the chemical strategy. There are some missed opportunities where important steps are taken in the right direction, but where more ambition is urgently needed. The climate package Fit for 55 and the forest strategy being two examples. Unfortunately, there are also failures. Not using the common agricultural policy as a tool for a sustainable transformation of European agriculture stand out as an obvious example.
Despite having made important progress, the European Green Deal has also met opposition. The COVID-19 crisis was used by some as an argument to slow down the European Green Deal. But the EGD became a guiding principle for the economic recovery efforts, even if practice often does not live up to the principle. Russia's illegal invasion on Ukraine has also been used by some interest groups to weaken and postpone important parts of the EGD. Yet, the war shows us that we need a more, not less ambitious EGD more than ever if we are to become independent on fossil fuels, material, price hikes, and undemocratic regimes. The European Green Deal can help Europe become more resilient towards new crises in the future. We are also seeing increasing polarization in Europe and in the world, and there are a number of examples of progressive environmental policies that are being turned into political battlefields. It is clear that we need to push for strong political commitment across political borders to ensure that important initiatives under the European Green Deal live up to the aspirations and are not hollowed down.
Today, we have brought together key players in the European environmental movement, progressive businesses, and academia with political decision makers to discuss the main challenges of ecological transition at European level and the way forward. We will discuss with our many knowledgeable speakers and panelists how far the European Green Deal has taken us to make the EU fit for a better future where people and nature thrive together. We will also explore what more can be done and still be achieved during this Commission and Parliament. Most importantly, we will look forward to the European parliamentary elections in spring 2024 and beyond. These coming years are critical to ensure the transformative agenda we need, that science has underlined as essential to tackle the triple crisis we are facing. That the EU needs to step up its ambition is clear. But what should be the next steps to make the EU a catalyst for a sustainable future in the next crucial years? What are the agents of change? And how can we ensure a pact for our common future, a stronger and more comprehensive European Green Deal too, that integrates environmental and climate policy with social justice and measures for the economic transition? These are key questions that we will return to throughout the day.
And we will now give the floor to today's moderators that will guide you through the program. And those are Patricia Heidegger, Deputy Secretary in the EEB, and Anneli Andersson, Head of Policy Coordination in the SSNC. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Johanna and Karen, for your words of welcome and for opening the conference. I'm Patricia Heidegger, the Deputy Secretary of the EEB, and I'm very pleased to be one of the co-moderators of today's annual events. So a big welcome and good morning to all of you here with us in Stockholm and to everyone online.
Yes, and my name is Anneli Andersson. I'm Head of Policy Coordination, or Stabschef in Swedish. Always find it hard to translate. And Patricia and I will be guiding you through today. And before going into the program, a few practical issues. There will be a coffee break at 10:15. More to come on that. And outside where you came in, that's where the coffee will be served, and that's also where you find toilets and emergency exits. And there's signs at the back of the room here for the emergency exits. And also a short note on accessibility. There are hearing loops in the room, and there were mobile loops available just outside of the room. And today's seminar will not be translated to sign language or live text, but for those watching afterwards, it will be available with text. And if you have any other requests or questions regarding accessibility, you can let one of our team members know. And we are well aware that all of you joining us today, both online and in the room, have a lot of knowledge to bring to the table and discussions on these issues. There won't be a lot of interaction in the program itself, but for those in the room, I would really encourage you to use the breaks to exchange with colleagues and discuss. And for those of you active on Twitter, you can share your thoughts and comments on the conference using hashtag EGD2. I think that will be shown. Yeah, it's down there, EGD2. And we will also use Slido throughout the day for asking questions to the audience, and also for some polls to the audience. We'll try it out in a minute. And maybe obvious to everyone, but still important to say that this conference is a place where we respect each other's opinion and we listen, so there will be no tolerance for disrespectful or discriminatory comments, nor from the onstage or from the audience. So we're trying Slido out. I think or maybe it's not. You go to slido.com on your phone or on your computer, and there you enter a code, and that code is hashtag EGD2, so same one that we're using for Twitter to make it easy. And doing that, you should find a question on where you are joining us from today. So please take a moment to fill that in, and we'll see where our audience are from and at.
Great, and while you do that, I will just quickly run you through the program. So we have 5 sessions today. In the first session, we'll hear from 2 key decision makers and what their visions are to achieve our environmental, climate, and sustainability objectives. In session 2, we will then have some time to go a little bit deeper into the 3 environmental crises. We will talk about what is needed on climate and energy, on nature and biodiversity protection and restoration, and how we can advance towards our zero pollution future, zooming in the topic of chemicals. And then after the lunch, we'll go into session 3, a panel debate with 4 representatives from European political parties. We have invited them to share with us already, now while they're working on their election manifestos for next year, what they will be promising to their voters. We will then have a reaction from a representative of the European youth environmental movement. She will react to what she has heard throughout the day and from the political leaders before we will then come to the wrap-up and summary of the conference, and then close just shortly after 3 p.m. So we can have a look at our Slido results, maybe to see if the audience has figured out the technical details. Can we see the results on the screen? Yes. So where is everybody joining us from this morning? Stockholm is in the middle. That's obvious, and that's great. And then we have Brussels there. We have other Swedish cities. We have Skopje, North Macedonia. We have Latvia, Serbia, Norway, Belgium, and so on. So thank you for sharing that with us, and welcome again to everyone, especially those of you online. So let us go straight into session 1. The question that we asked for the title is, what do we need our common future to look like, and what do we need to do to make this happen? We have 2 speakers here. Both have sent us a video message. So as a first speaker, I can announce a video message from the European Environment Commissioner, Virginijus Sinkevicius. He's traveling today, so this is why he's not joining us live. He and his team and well, the experts working at the Directorate General for the Environment have been quite central or key in developing and proposing a lot of new legislation, policies and instruments under the European Green Deal. And the Commission is still very committed, so he said, to still present all the proposals that they have promised to us. So we're very keen to hear what he has to share with us for our annual conference. Can we please see the video?
A very good morning to you all, and thank you for this invitation to launch the proceedings. EEB are influential players in Brussels and all around the Union. The Commission looks very carefully at your assessments. Your comments are always welcome. Together with EEB, we share a vision of a common future, a world of clean air, clean water and clean soil, an environment that's toxic-free. There are many obstacles on the way. Last year we learned that we are already the wrong side of the planetary boundary for chemical pollution. Pollution is our third planetary crisis, along with biodiversity loss and global heating. With the EU Green Deal, we have a good chance of getting back on track. But we have to keep driving in the right direction, and we need to get everyone on board. We all know there are toxins all around us. PFAS are a good example. They are serious concern for human health and the environment. European human biomonitoring is finding them in the blood of teenagers at all levels, well above acceptable threshold. 10 years ago, the EU lists 1 PFAS under the Water Framework Directive. Now that the harmfulness of others is widely acknowledged, we are proposing to add 24 more to the list of priority substances. But if you want to be toxic-free, you have to stop pollution at source. That's why an EU-wide group restriction was initiated in January. It will still be a long process before the restriction becomes law, because we have to proceed with care. We have to strike a balance between the need for protection and the need to allow essential uses of PFAS, at least until alternatives are found. And I'm thinking of examples of uses of PFAS for net zero applications, which we really need to decarbonize society. EU experts will help us understand what derogations will be justified. Our chemicals legislation is already among the strictest in the world, but there is still so much to do. To make things legal, framework more preventive, we are starting to favor a group approach. The way we are doing for PFAS. That is the only way to prevent one harmful chemical from being replaced by another with similar harmful properties. We are also extending restrictions of harmful chemicals to groups of products like articles for childcare. And we are stepping up restrictions on endocrine disruptors. The most harmful chemicals, like PFAS, will only be allowed when use is essential for society. Our thinking is essential use will be an incentive for swift innovation. It will help companies answer 2 basic questions. Do we really need to use this chemical? And if we do, how can we do things in a different way? Those are also questions for you and me, questions for the society as a whole. We all want to safeguard our environment and do a better job protecting our children. There are ways to go faster, to do better, and to do more. And I look forward to the outcome of your conference, because I'm sure you will provide some excellent suggestions. Best wishes for your discussions today, and please, keep on pushing for a greater ambition.
So we thank the Commissioner for his message, and well, I'm happy that he mentioned chemical pollution as the main topic of his intervention. As you all know, chemical regulation has been under fire the last months, and we've been working very hard, fighting very hard for it not to be off the agenda. So I think his intervention gave a lot of material to keep on this discussion in one of the breakout sessions that we will have later on. So over to you for our other speaker.
Yes, and one important reason for us holding this conference in Stockholm now is, of course, the ongoing Swedish EU presidency. And I'm therefore very happy to be able to introduce a message from the Swedish Minister of Climate and Environment, Romina Pourmokhtari. Unfortunately, she was not able to be here due to other obligations, but she has also sent us a message, which we will have a look at now.
Distinguished participants, thank you for inviting me to your annual meeting and for giving me the opportunity to record this speech digitally. My name is Romina Pourmokhtari and I'm the Minister for Climate and the Environment of Sweden. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend in person, but I value this opportunity to briefly inform you about the work of the Swedish presidency so far. The aim of our presidency is to make the EU greener, safer and freer, and these matters are not isolated but deeply intertwined. If we accelerate the green transition, we not only reach our climate and environmental targets, but we will also increase security of our future societies and our competitiveness. The transition to a resource-efficient, carbon-free future will require major investments in innovative industries that can translate both existing and new technology into functional solutions. The green transition is one of Sweden's overarching presidency priorities, and we are committed to deliver on the objectives of the Green Deal. Much work remains, but we have already made good progress during the past 4 months. One of our main objectives is to finalize the remaining files of the Fit for 55 package, which aims to ensure that the EU reduces its net emissions by at least 55% by 2030 and becomes climate neutral by 2050. Now, we have managed to take many important steps forward during this spring. We have, for example, reached preliminary agreements with the Parliament on renewable energy, energy efficiency and expansion of charging infrastructure, sustainable maritime fuels, and most recently also sustainable air transport fuels, which is a very exciting development. Furthermore, all of the climate files in the package have now been formally adopted by both the European Parliament and the European member states. The Fit for 55 package truly represents a landmark in the implementation of EU's climate ambitions, and it also provides European industries with long-term conditions so that they can lead with green solutions that can increase Europe's global competitiveness. Another milestone so far is that the Council has agreed on a common position on the Industrial Emissions Directive, which regulates pollutant emissions from industrial installations and from livestock farms. And before the end of our presidency, we have the ambition to reach Council positions on the Eco-Design Regulation, the Waste Shipment Directive, the CLP Regulation, and as well the Nature Restoration Law. Moreover, we have started trilogue negotiations with the European Parliament for Environmental Crimes Directive, as well as for the F-gases, the ozone regulations as well. And I do not expect us to be able to finalize those, but I'm happy that we have managed to get some important progress on these files. And finally, we've made significant progress on other important acts of the Green Deal, among them the Ambient Air Quality Directive, the Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, Euro 7, and the CO2 standards for heavy-duty vehicles, as well as the certification framework for carbon removals. Now, our ambition is to progress as much as possible on the ongoing negotiations before we hand over to Spain. It is important that the Council and the European Parliament pass as much Green Deal legislation as possible before the European election campaigns start. And as the current chair of the Council, I would just like to express some concern over the delays and uncertainties surrounding the delivery of various pieces of the strategy regarding a revised REACH regulation. REACH is a central element in the implementation of the chemical strategy and of the Green Deal. And it is also a cornerstone for an extended generic risk management, driving the necessary substitution of substances of concern in articles. To achieve a circular economy, substances of concern need to be replaced by safe and sustainable alternatives in different articles and materials. And if the proposal on the revised REACH regulation would be put forward by the Commission during our presidency, I would kickstart the negotiations without delay. In the meantime, I welcome the broad restriction proposal on PFAS, which was recently prepared and presented by 5 member states, and I'm proud that Sweden was one of them. Restricting hazardous substances group-wide is in line with the chemical strategy and will contribute to building a more circular economy in all of Europe. After the European Parliament elections, there will be a new political environment in the EU, and I hope that the next Commission, as well as the new Parliament, will continue to strive for a robust European policy framework and ensure our transition to a resource-efficient, emissions-free and sustainable future. If we as policymakers enable for our businesses to accelerate the green transition by providing the right regulatory framework, this will strengthen Europe's competitiveness in the long run. And early movers will have a competitive edge in periods of industrial and technological transition. European companies that provide green solutions will be in high global demand and can help drive the transition and contribute to fighting climate change, preserving and restoring biodiversity, as well as reducing pollution in closing material loops. So it is time to build a stronger Europe with a green, resilient and future-proof economy that can spur prosperity also for our future generations. I hope that you will have stimulating and fruitful discussions today, and I look forward to taking part of your conclusions. Thank you for listening.
So we're very happy to hear that the Swedish minister is showing ambition when it comes to getting as much legislation as possible in place before the European elections, and also for ambitious policies after the elections. The minister mentioned a long list of important legislation, and it's difficult to comment on one of these, as each one would require its own session. But there's still almost 2 months to go of the Swedish presidency, so there's still time to push the negotiations to get as far as possible. Yeah, so we're heading into the panels in the next session.
Yes, session 2.
Session 2. And you, yeah.
I will see you later.
Yeah, we will see you later on stage. So now we are moving into, we will have 3 panels discussing the 3 different crises, as Johanna and Karin mentioned in their introduction, and as everyone participating here today are well aware of. We're facing a triple crisis: climate change, loss of biodiversity, and chemical pollution. And the EU has a key role to play in addressing these. We will be speaking about how far the European Green Deal has taken us, what can still be expected in the year to go until the European elections, and what needs to be done in the coming years after the elections. And before welcoming our first facilitator for the first panel, I'll just go through a few practical things. You can continue to share your thoughts on Twitter, as I mentioned before. And then the Slido that we tried out before. When you're already logged into Slido through the code gave you before, and there's a Q&A session, like part in Slido, Q&A. That's where you can post questions to the audience that you want to ask to the audience, because that's how we will be picking up questions to the audience today. There will, like during these 3 panels, there won't be the possibility to grab a mic and ask a question from the audience, but both you in the room and you participating online ask your questions on Slido. And there's also the possibility on Slido that if you see that someone else already asked a question that you find interesting, you can like that question. That way we see which are the questions that the audience find the most relevant. So that said, I give the floor now to today's first facilitator, Luke Haywood, Policy Manager for Climate and Energy at the EEB, who will facilitate this first panel. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. Great pleasure to be here. Before I start, I wanted to share with you how I got here. So I took the boat, but that's another story. So I was asked by a colleague, Luke, do you want to facilitate a panel? And I'm like, sure, why not? Yeah, what's it on? The European Green Deal? Yeah, Green Deal, the whole. Yeah, past, present, and future. That's a big. Luke, don't worry. It's just the climate part. Only the climate. That's only the emissions trading scheme, social climate fund, market stability reserve, sustainable fuel aviation, sustainable fuel in maritime. Then there's the performance of buildings directive, the renewable energy. So I'm thinking, this is sure. I can do that, but it's going to be intense. It's going to be a bit heavy, maybe. It's yeah. Yeah, but don't make it too heavy, Luke, because it's the first session. You want to get people to a good start. So I'm like, okay, maybe I can show some pictures of cats or something. No slides. And also, it's a serious, there might be some people who have very strong feelings about climate change. There might even be some protesters that might be angry if you're too positive. So this is getting difficult by now. It's like not too positive, not too negative. And I'm thinking I don't want to sort of put the panel in a difficult position because I'm just facilitating. So, it's okay for me, but I don't want to put the panel. We have a very distinguished panel. So I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, why don't I share the responsibility with you, all of you? So I want you to take the responsibility for how optimistic or pessimistic you are with respect to the climate, but also with respect to the EU policies in this area. And I'd like to invite you to go on Slido, and if our technical geniuses could go to the first question on Slido. As you know, the aim is to increase the average global temperatures to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial average. And so the good start to the day answer is right at the bottom. I had put it at the top, but obviously, no, they changed in the distribution. Okay, so the 0% answer is the good start to the week. The more than 3 degrees Celsius is sort of getting to climate chaos. I didn't dare put any more on there, but it's not my fault. It's it's a shared responsibility. I can't even vote, so. Okay, so 2 to 3 degrees. Okay. We're stabilizing there. So we're missing the objective. Under 1.5 degrees, quite poorly. There's 1% of positive people. Okay, that's good. So thanks very much for that. It's not my fault. I was not at all responsible for this. So I thought this might be a bit risky with one question. I'm an economist, portfolio diversification, spread the risk. So I have a second question. So it's the possibility now for you to catch up. If we could have the second Slido question, so how confident are you that the EU will reach its 2030 targets? So this is reducing emissions by 55% with respect to 1990. As EEB, NGOs, we were more for 65%. Now Timmermans is saying maybe 57% is realistic. But other people are saying, transport, agriculture, we haven't really been doing very much. Are we actually going to get there? So people are unsure, not very confident, So when I wrote what crisis might strike, I can see the EEB colleagues going polycrisis and biodiversity, but I was thinking more of Greek letters or maybe the letter Z. Okay, so people are not super confident. You're not helping the panel, but maybe the panel can then create the balance. So let's have just one third question before I hand over to the panel. So now it's the 2050 targets. The same question, but looking a little bit ahead. So whereas for the 2030 target, we have the Fit for 55 package. This is the big thing. For 2050, we haven't really got a lot in place. The aim is carbon neutrality. That's to be defined. But again, lots of people think unsure what crisis, not confident. We have 11% who think we're on track. 10%? Yeah, okay. 9%? Okay. So I'm not quite sure about the good start to the day, but yeah, it's a shared responsibility. We can blame it on the online people, maybe that makes it feel better in the coffee break, maybe. I'd now like to ask our very distinguished panel to join me, and we'll take a seat and then try and digest these results as best as we can.
As you wish.
Wherever you like, please. Of course, best would have been in the order that I have on here. But
yes. You choose the green.
Yeah, that was unintentional, but maybe subconscious.
This is perfect. So to my left, we have Nina Ikelund from Haga Initiativet, Executive Director. Haga Initiativet is a network of companies that works to reduce carbon emissions from the business sector and highlight the climate issue by showing that ambitious climate strategies create business advantages and improve profitability. And that's not only the usual suspects. There's some big companies that I wouldn't have suspected there, so Coca-Cola Sweden and McDonald's Sweden. Nina is also founder of her consultancy, if I understood correctly, so I really look forward to some insights from large and small businesses. To her left, we have Michael Lee, the Secretary General of Solidar. Like the EEB, Solidar is a network of civil society organizations, 50 members, some of which are themselves networks, like EEB. For example, here locally, we have the Olof Palme Internationella Center, and which is itself an umbrella of labor market organizations, where Michael worked for many years. And his self-description on Twitter is Secretary General fighting to advance social justice through a just transition. To her left, to his left is Chiara Martinelli, Director of Climate Action Network Europe. CAN Europe is like the EEB and Solidar, a coalition of NGOs, a network. But it not only has networks as members, it's itself part of an international network. So there is a CAN International and CAN Arab World, CAN Southeast Asia. It's very impressive. The self-description of CAN Europe is Europe's leading NGO coalition fighting dangerous climate change. And I'm happy to say that we work very closely with CAN on many areas. So I'd really like to give the floor to you now. And the sort of two guiding questions that we had was, how is Fit for 55 going? How is 2030 going? What remains to be done? And then, maybe what are the priorities for the next legislature? And yeah, all that in 2 minutes. Would you like to start, Nina?
Thank you so much. And I just want to say that we have a 1.5-degree strategy. So all the companies are setting targets not aligned with 2 degrees or 3, but with 1.5. And that means more than halving their emission every 10 years, even more ambitious. And for every year we don't succeed, we need to be more ambitious. And if we are going to succeed, we need to have policy with us. And the problem right now, and I just want to say that, is that EU is on track, but the Swedish policy is not on track. And that means having our targets that we wrote around 2017, because of policy haven't been on track, we might have to change our ambitious targets and lower them. And that is a problem. So we are asking for ambitious policy to succeed. So with that said, it's a lot of things that need to be done after Green Deal and Fit for 55 and so. And I really don't know where to start. We can see, looking at a bigger picture, we can see that we're getting a lot of right-wing parties all over Europe, and they are not fond of ambitious climate policy. And they are also talking to the people in the countryside, in rural areas, and saying it's expensive with climate change. And they are not talking about biodiversity or chemicals, etc. right now, what we can see. So if we, as a business network, is going to succeed, we also need to think of the people that are not on track for the climate transformation. So, and that is really strange, but starting to talk about that as a business person, that we need a just transition. But that is really, really important. Otherwise, it won't go the right way. So we do need to evaluate policy so far. We need to not only look at climate. In our business network, it's a climate business network. But we have started to look at biodiversity as well and see how we can connect biodiversity and climate, and as business move policy further. And that is also something that's really needed in Europe. And we need to talk about the benefits the added values of the climate change. We can see when we look at our companies, if we not do the climate transition, we will lose jobs and certainly not get new jobs. We can see that our welfare will be worsened. We can see that health is not going the right track if we don't do the climate transition. So you need to talk about these positive added values also. And also now, we are in a situation with IRA, Inflation Reduction Act in USA, and that is going, it's really good because we can see that it's easier for US to reach their targets. But we need an appropriate answer from the European Union on that field as well. I can continue for a long time, maybe my time, I'm probably run out of time.
Let's
So.
go rather have a second round. Okay, please.
Well, thank you. And happy that you mentioned just transition. I think from my side and from my organization side, Solar represents 50 progressive civil society organizations, many of them or most of them active in the field of social justice or social rights. And I think our own organization networks changed from being a solely network focusing solely on just transition focusing solely on social rights, general welfare, access to social rights and social justice across Europe, to realizing what you just mentioned, Nina, that there is no social justice, there's no social rights if you don't deal with this triple crisis. And you mentioned the triple crisis in your program. Now, I mean, if this was my annual General Assembly, we would have added a crisis of the social inequality crisis that are rising throughout Europe. And if we don't tackle that properly, we open the field wide open to populist and nationalist right. We see it now in the Swedish debate. We had the Swedish Democrats, who is the current nationalist, former fascist party of Sweden, who, whereas the current government now are lowering the ambitions in terms of reduction in fuel, they praise it as a win for the ordinary man, for the common people. And we, as a combined effort between social and environmental movements, we need to find a new language that counters this properly. If we don't, and we don't accompany policies to it, we will lose this battle. Of that I'm convinced. And that is especially true now as we are advancing into the European parliamentary elections, that we need to really do what we can here in Sweden, which is perhaps historically also a bit EU-skeptic nation, but across Europe, together, because these European elections will be decisive, not just for the Green Deal, but for all the ambitions of this past Commission and Parliament. On the Green Deal, then, comes naturally from this. We're very happy. I mean, I think we can all agree that it's been, in its own right, as policy, a major step forward. It's not seen before. It's fostered a whole range of legislative proposals, legislative files, policy recommendations. It's been a sort of an onslaught of new initiatives from the Commission we haven't seen before in this way. And it's been, in a way, I would say, encouraged by an increased unity at the union level that was perhaps surprising, I don't know, the outcome of the COVID pandemic, as well as the united response to Russia's aggression towards Ukraine now. However, and we've seen the European Pillar of Social Rights and the Nicolas Schmidt, the commissioner responsible for that, launching the European Pillar of Social Rights and its action plan. And there's always been talk between the commissions and the DGs to further sort of relate these two policy areas together, the Green Deal with the European Pillar of Social Rights, and make sure that they speak to each other to not leave anyone behind. However, we don't see, from our perspective, the right ambition in this way. It's not embedded in policy. It's not the starting point for policy conversations. And as long as it's not the starting point for policy conversations, and if I don't mean to disrespect my invitees, I'm very happy to be here, and we work very, very closely and very well with the EEB and so. But I think if we fail to mention the social inequality crisis, for example, when we speak of the crisis, and then we speak about policy measures only about chemicals, about emissions trade, or any other technical aspect of this, we risk further this alienation to the people that we should be serving with this policy, because there's great promise in this transition. We could do a lot at the same time. We are hearing from UN level to EU level policymakers, researchers, there's a huge unanimity. I mean, if you've been ambitious and I know hopeful since you were a young politically engaged person that we could have a new future. Now everybody speaks about this new future and then transformative change needed. Transformative change, structural change, systemic change. These are words not from some extreme left group who sort of wishes something new for the entire society. This is the UN Secretary General. These are the commissioners of the European Union who speaks this language. And if we're supposed to hold them accountable, climate and environmental policy really needs to be accompanied by social and economic policy that furthers this change. So a just transition at the heart of this, otherwise I fear we will fail in the essential change in terms of climate and environment as well.
Thank you. Chiara, please.
Yes, so first of all, I'm a little bit sad about the results of the questions, but I do hope that these kind of gatherings, as Michael said, like, you know, this need that we have to work together is helping us to be a little bit more positive about the future we want to build. Because I wanted to start with that because I think it's tough. It's tough, and the situation is not easy one, and there are many people around the world and in Europe as well suffering out of the impacts of climate change. But I think we do have a responsibility as climate movement to put also a positive narrative into the discussion and to showcase and continuing underline what are the positive steps that have been done that are not enough, but that we need to continue fighting for. And I wanted to start with that because, as you said, and also the speakers before me said, like, you ask, like, where are we with this European Green Deal? I think we do need to recognize that the Fit for 55 legislative package is a package that has no precedent in terms of bringing things together. And if today we can say that we are not happy, but it's a good step to build on, I think this is the narrative we are trying to find. It's also because of the work of all of us and the work of people that, together with us, has been fighting hard to make sure that these different files were keeping pushing in terms of action and in terms of ambition. So I think we do need to celebrate that as well, and I hope that will help us to move a step forward. And please don't take it as a naive thing, but I really believe this is a strategy element that we need in terms of next steps. Then I just wanted, I mean, many things has been said about the Fit for 55 already. I think maybe what I would like to add is that also the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, I think despite the horrible situation where we all find ourselves, and especially our colleagues and people in Ukraine, I think with the Repower EU and the answer of the European Union to such a situation, we did get some additional help in terms of accelerating the transition that we wanted to see. So I think when we try to assess the Fit for 55, I would like also to keep like the Repower EU and all the debate that happened last year as part of the picture. Of course, so as we said, we are in a moment where we can build on all of that, but also we needed to keep saying the truth, so to keep saying that it's not enough, it's not just enough, it's not fast enough, and we should do better. Maybe I focus just quickly on two things that I believe as a Climate Action Network Europe are really the big miss in where we stand today with the European Green Deal. The first of all, I mean, not surprisingly, probably to all of you, ambition is not enough. The whole package is based on trying to reach a 55% emission reduction by 2030, where we do say and we do call together for 65% emission reduction, as the science is telling us since many years now. And these are not just numbers. 1.5 is not just number. 1.5 is a moral imperative on all of us. So I think we do need to keep repeating that this package is not enough when it comes to ambition. And I think we can maybe go in the next round back on what we can do to make sure that we scale up this ambition. And the second part, just to support also what Michael said, is the imbalance between social protection and free allowances to industries and big polluters. So I think if we don't reverse that, we cannot move forward.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to, you can remember to go on, you can start posing your questions on Slido. I have 3 little questions for each of you. But in the meantime, you can already start posing your questions on Slido, and you can also vote up, or maybe you can also vote down. I'm not sure whether positive and negative. But you can maybe positively encourage the good questions you'd like to hear, and then a colleague will come and inform us of what the world out there thinks of us. So Nina, you mentioned the sort of opportunities for business, but there's also a lot of things which are not going so well, and some businesses is clearly going to lose as well. And I mean, how do we deal with them? I read just yesterday that if all the renewable electricity we're producing in the whole EU, if we used that to produce e-fuels for aviation, all of the whole EU renewable electricity, we would only just produce enough for the current demand of aviation. So clearly, aviation industry, we need to fly less, no? How do we deal with that transition challenge that some industry is going to lose?
And they have lost before. So this is nothing new. We don't have type machines anymore. So that area disappeared. We don't have, we have Spotify and Netflix instead, and what happened to the industries before. We are in a transition now, and things will change. And for companies, that's quite a normal way of doing it. You know, the fossil industry, they will disappear. They can't be using oil and coal. So, and haven't they understood that? By looking at what's happening in the world, it's just they will lose. So, and they won't exist in the future because all the policy in the European Union going on another track. And then we have some backlashes here in Sweden right now and sending the wrong signals to companies. But companies have understood that we are right in the middle of a transition, and that's the only way that's to change. So when I talk to companies, for an example, looking at the big companies in the stock market in Sweden, it's 130 companies. 2 years ago, we asked them, how many of you have targets halving your emission? 1 out of 5, 20%. Then we asked last year, it was 66%. It's a lot. Looking at what will happen next year, I think the target will be, I guess, around 80%. So the companies, they are putting up tough targets, and they are changing their business because they know they have to, otherwise they won't exist.
Let's hope we get to 100%.
Yes, I hope so too. But you know, asking, if we don't ask, because every time we ask about, do you have a target halving your emission? There is a lot of companies, and if they don't have, they get a red light. They don't want to have a red light. So they send an email, thank you for asking us. Next year we will have a tougher target. So just by asking and giving them a red light if they don't have the right targets, it's one way of pushing them.
Yeah. Great, thanks. I'm a little bit aware of the time because we do want to get these Slido questions. So let's just move on to Michael. I had, when I was thinking of sort of social actors and this, the working together that you were talking about, one thing over the last sort of year, when we had this energy price crisis, we did see quite a few social actors saying, you know, we need price caps. This can't go on, prices can't rise forever. And then it's like a situation of scarcity. We have fewer fossil fuels coming into Europe. They have to be distributed in some way. And then calling for the price cap is really just redistributing who gets them, no? So it seemed to end up being fossil fuel subsidies, and I think this was something which lots of social actors didn't really understand. And I mean, this is the scarcity that's coming because we're going to reduce emissions. No, how do we get the social actors to understand that we have to deal with this scarcity in a different way? We can't keep prices low.
I don't know how to answer that. But
sorry, it's a tough question.
but, I think it comes out of this inherent tension between the transition that we know that we have to do in terms of our environment and climate action, and the social tension that might arise from it. And if we don't do it together with the social actors, if we don't do it together with social movements and trade unions, inviting them as they are in many countries already accustomed to be invited. And when it comes to structural change, when you see companies going through these sort of upheavals or quite drastic changes that we've seen in the past, when trade unions have been involved, when social actors have been involved in civil and social dialogue, the transition has become much smoother, the acceptance for the transition has been much greater, and the accuracy of the policy proposed has been better. We saw it also during the pandemic. The countries where these actors were invited to conversations about how we should deal with the effects of the pandemic, when that happened, those countries were better off than the countries that didn't do so. So I don't know exactly how those conversations should be developed or the content of those conversations. What I do know, though, is that if we don't create a space for these actors to come together and have this dialogue, that will never happen. And I think, and then it's not perhaps up to me to be I don't know, that's not my forte. I know.
So
you'll be the judge of what my forte is, but it's not exactly the technical solution to this, because there's both an economic answer, I suppose, as well as a technological and engineering answer to, okay, how do we do then with this change? How do we redistribute the cost of this properly? What we do know from the past and what we do know from right now, though, if we don't add a progressive element to it, of equality and justice, then it will also fail. So if we're going to redistribute this, we need to redistribute it according to a progressive model. Otherwise, it will also fail, because then it will leave large swaths of the population behind. And I think that is a key feature of the future, and we need to be better in accompanying when we launch a proposal of climate and environmental legislation, whatever that might be. It needs to be accompanied by a social proposal as well. They need to go hand in hand. We need to show people that, okay, we do this on the one hand, where we change society, we change the conditions for companies, we change the conditions for perhaps an entire locality. And I mean, in many regions in Europe, an entire region or entire city depends on one particular company or one particular sector. So if we're going to change the conditions for that sector entirely, we need to embed in the proposal already from the beginning economic and social policies that counter or deal with the effects of that policy. Otherwise, they will just feel left alone, unlistened to, and what we have then is fierce resistance to this change.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And some trade unions have been better than others in taking on board the environmental necessity.
And there's a lot of good examples. I mean, we have some, at least tentatively, positive examples from Germany, same in Spain, where we've invited local communities to these kind of discussions, where just transition then happens more naturally or more smoothly. That's
and then you have the mining and the chemicals trade unions that are pretty bad as well.
And they're very strong, They're very, very strong in their respective sectors. They're the origins of democracy in many ways. So if you don't invite them, they will resist.
Thanks. So before we get to the online questions, and maybe you found your way to Slido as well, Chiara, I was wondering whether you could maybe, because we spoke a lot about networks, and we're all very well networked. I mentioned you're probably the best networked of all of us, and yet we see climate action is so painfully slow. And I mean, if there was one actor you could really win over, is it maybe the farmers lobbying against nature restoration? Is it the chemical industry lobbying against REACH, the fossil fuel against the heating decarbonization? Who do we need to win over to actually win the battle? If we have the feeling it's going too slow and we're not getting there and we're at 3 degrees, is there any? Do you have a?
I don't have a favorite, but I think, we are saying here, like, we do need to work together. I think maybe what we need to learn, this is my personal assessment also of the last years, that working together is not enough, because I think we need to work together and being strong on our specific added value as well. Working together doesn't mean all doing the same things, but really like supporting each other in the spaces where social actors or where trade unions are, and they should be. So I think this is also maybe a shift in the way we work together, and here I'm speaking more as civil society organizations and all of that. I do think for Can Europe, what is important, and I think what we need to win, is also to make sure that EU debates are not anymore only for EU. I mean, this should, I think, is a change maker. I mean, if you think about the role of business and the just transition as a whole, I mean, we cannot pretend to solve this in a conversation among Europeans. So I think this is an important factor that we need to put forward, that will help us to look more closely and more truly to the impacts of EU policy on the rest of the world. And also the dependence that we do have on the rest of the world when it comes to 100% renewables and all of that. And maybe one thing I wanted to say when I spotted this reflection on strategies and alliances, I think we need to become better, all of us, in linking up the EU level and the national level. Now we are working all on the national energy and climate plans, and I think it's a great opportunity to really strengthen the national action and the national support all over Europe, I think, to advance the ambition.
Wonderful. Yes, that's especially ahead of the European Parliament elections, be really important. Yeah. So maybe Anneli, if you could, did we have some engagement?
Yes, there is a lot of engagement on Slido. Great to see, and you're also using the thumbs up to, so we know what you're most interested in. And I have 3 questions here that there's one on political ideologies across the spectrum assume that increased production creates well-being. How do we address this root cause problem? So basically the growth paradigm. And then the next question is, while we started with energy transition towards renewable, we made 0 progress with transforming land use, agricultural sector. How do we get there with an EGD2? And then there's one question specifically to Nina. What are the points where you need more ambitious national policies in order for you as a business to step up your own ambitious targets? So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll see how far we get.
Thanks. Yes, that's a good target. Yes. Would you like to start maybe with the last question?
Yes, we need political leadership. That's the aim, because we can see we need to talk about acceptance, legitimacy, as you talk about, and we need to talk about tougher targets, and we need the right incentives, etc. But if you have a political leadership have a policy that is not long-term, and that have a policy that's not predictable for business, and it's changing suddenly, and it's not. And the best thing is when you also we have a parliamentarian system here, when you have all the parties together and saying, we want to go here. And we don't have that. So a political leadership also as a leader and as a prime minister in Sweden talking about climate in a way that you reach to people. And now it more sounds like it's expensive with the climate change. You will be affected in a very negative way. And we must decide by ourselves in Sweden. And it's a lot of things just talking about climate in a really as scaring people. You need to talk about it in a different way. This is positive for people, and we will get better health here. We get more jobs. We will have more profitable business if we have a tougher, more ambitious climate agenda. We can't see that from the leadership today.
Great, thanks. Mikael, maybe for you, interesting the question on does increased consumption always lead to more well-being? I mean, is this something? So we have a great team working on economic transition, working on these big ideas at EEB, and they, for example, have talked a lot about working time reduction. I mean, is this something that in the trade union movement is maybe a little bit more on the table? It seems to have been a little bit less prominent the last sort of two decades or so. Is that maybe a way forward, or what could you see as tools to get to reduced consumption, but in a good way?
Well, I think we're together in the Beyond Growth conference now in a couple of weeks in the European Parliament, and perhaps the great interest that has sparked among policymakers and civil society and social actors in EU is perhaps a sign of the times. There was also a thematic in the European Trade Union Institute, which is the sort of educational research wing of the European Trade Union Confederation, and their great interest in looking into policy and politics that would generate something else than this growth-oriented capitalism that we have now. I think there is a lot of interest in terms of how we do this. When we talk about degrowth, though, the term itself, that is not flying with the social movement at all, because it sounds like, well, it sounds negative. It sounds like you have to give up too much. And it sounds like it's gonna be us who is doing, the working class or the working poor or whatever. It's not gonna be the rich. That for sure we know. So when we look at degrowth in that sense, it's gonna be the ones who already have. They will perhaps maintain what they have, and the ones who doesn't have yet or would like to have, they would have to sort of take a step back. But I don't think we need to get bogged down in a conceptual discussion, because everything that relates to the concept of degrowth, to my understanding, and post-growth, beyond growth, whatever we choose to call it, relates to these issues of transformative change, of systemic change and so forth. Because in that discussion, we talk about how we need to change the dynamics of current capitalism. We need to change the dynamic of extractive industries, we can't just have continuous growth. This will not be the force of the future. So if we focus on those issues and how we would like to change the economy rather than the concept, I think we will have the trade unions and social movements on board, because I would say there's this greater interest, and there's a great promise in that. This puts into question the whole social model. However, entering into it, I think the entire identity of the trade union movement and the social movement lies in this narrative that we got a growth, and with growth, we could attach policy that was redistributed. So we got more, and with that more, we could redistribute it to more people. And that is deeply entrenched in the identity and the history of the trade union movement and the social movements. So we need to deal it with that respect, I think, in terms of how we enter into that conversation with them, and with us, if I make myself the representative of it, because then it's easier to get them to listen and get them on board. Because politically, economically, in terms of trying to find a new economy for the future, I think we have it all there. So in that, I'm very optimistic. That we found unity between the movements.
Great. Well, you made some friends in plugging the Beyond Growth conference, I'm sure, in the room here. So well done for that. I encourage you all to attend. Kara, maybe the sort of problematic sectors, land use, agriculture. What's your vision on that?
An easy one. Yeah, I mean, I think this is. I don't have the solutions, of course. Otherwise, probably I will get the Nobel Prize in the beautiful room.
It's the right place.
No, but I think that's one of the big, I'd say, the big losses of this European Green Deal one, in a way that didn't manage to keep this kind of holistic policy coherence across all sectors and moving those sectors all at the same speed. So I think that it's highly recognized, even among EU officials and European Commission officials. We recently had, together with Patrick, a meeting with Vice President Timmermans, where he said himself that he recognized he completely lost the agriculture fight. So I think this is a big big points, and probably is where we do need to invest now, like in the next step, to make sure that is getting back on track. I think what we have in common when it comes to the energy transition, maybe acceleration that we saw, and the sector of agriculture or transport that personally I don't know much, but I think what they have in common is really like this pointing out on big polluters pay first. I think that is what we need to ensure across the different policies. If we really want to transform the agriculture system, we need to make sure the agribusiness and big corporations working on agriculture, they are the first that put the investments and the pay for such a transformation of the agriculture system to happen. I think this is vital to make the step forward. And the second element that all this has in common, and EEB as much knowledge than myself on this, is all the environmental safeguards that we need to put at the forefront of the energy transition, but also on the shift of the agriculture system, and I think the conservation of biodiversity and all of that. I think this is something we will have to fight a lot, and this is what has been said earlier. Like, it's all about getting the narrative right, that it's not something that is on top of your life or on top of your work, but that is really like part of a one fight and a one agenda that we all need to have.
Great, thanks. Yes, well, that's a task for us. So at EEB, we also have some colleagues actually looking precisely at the agricultural chapters of these national energy and climate plans. So we're definitely trying to step up on that front. I don't know, shall we go for some more questions, or how are we doing on time?
I think we need to wrap up for the coffee break.
See, because I made up time because
hate to be the party pooper, but yeah.
We started a little bit late, but now, well, but you know, it's well done. So yes, well, I don't know whether I should give some very last words. What I was thinking of, what I'd like to share with all of you is this feeling that we're all climate realists now. There is no more climate skepticism, really. And then sometimes it feels like we're all allies and we're all in this together. And I think the key thing to watch out for is, are we also solution realists? And solution realists for the field that I know best, which is energy and climate, is, you know, we need to reduce our material and energy footprint, and we need renewables. If people are not on board for these two, for either of these two, they're not realists on solutions. If they are promoting fantasy solutions like nuclear, like hydrogen for heating, like e-fuels for vehicles, that is solutions denial. And that is a real issue that we have to fight for together. And that's my little pitch for you all. And I'd like to ask you to join give a hand for our wonderful panel. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for everyone who participated in the Slido, online and here. And with that,
yeah, I'll give you some practical information. Thank you for kicking off for the first panel. And it's time for a coffee break. For all of you in the room, outside you'll find coffee, tea, sandwiches, or something sweet for those who prefer that. And we have many things on the agenda today, so there's another 2 panels after the coffee break. So make sure to mingle, have a look at the exhibitions out there, but be back seated by 10:45 or in front of your computer again by 10:45. Thank you.